Part 3. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 21. The resurrected pilot had been turned out of the coffin. Everyone noticed that in addition to the fact that the skin on his body turned a strange gray-black color, his hip joints and knees were bent in the opposite direction to humans. This structure looks like the ankle of a hoofed animal. Compared with the original human skeleton, this reflex joint is more mechanically efficient and has more powerful explosive power. "He found us," the Hound whispered. Although it was not sure whether the pilot's two cloudy eyes still had vision, it had obviously been aware of the existence of the intruder and quickly jumped off the high platform. He roared and moved step by step towards the direction of the hunters. Its back was arched like a shrimp, its chest was bent down, but its head was raised high. Its expression was stiff, a pair of sharp canine teeth were exposed from the outturned lips, and blood-streaked saliva dripped from the corners of its mouth. It is now more like a beast than a human being, a hungry beast. "Everyone, come together and kill it," Layton roared, took a few steps, and threw an axe with a trace of nano alloy in the blade. The hand axe rotated at high speed in mid-air, and hit the pilot's shoulder with a buzzing sound. However, the imagined scene of flesh tearing did not appear. The axe could not even remove one of the opponent's arms. It only cut a finger width and 10 centimeters long on the pilot's shoulder. "Kauza, there will be no more achievements." Layton's breathing stagnated slightly. The opponent's physical strength had greatly exceeded his expectations. The power of a 4th-level biochemically modified man plus the battle axe integrated with nano alloy, at a distance of 50 meters, he could just scratch the skin. What surprised the hunters even more was that less than 2 seconds after the wound appeared, a large number of squirming granulations had already squeezed out from the inside. In just one breath, the granulations had filled the wound and formed on the epidermis. A layer of protective tissue similar to the cuticle. The target's physical strength is visually estimated to exceed that of a 7th-level modified human. At the same time, tissue cells have extremely strong ability to divide and proliferate, which can quickly repair wounds and promote adaptive changes in tissues. Ivan took out a holographic weapon from his backpack. The voice recorder with camera function records quickly. The pilot was attacked and immediately sped up. He kicked his folded legs on the ground and jumped out more than 10 meters in an instant, shortening the distance between him and Kaylan and the others. He has to be decapitated or cut off his spine. Ordinary attacks cannot make him lose the ability to resist. Ivan put away his pistol. In this kind of close-range melee, the pistol not only failed to cause effective damage to the target, but it was also easy to accidentally injure him. To one's own people. Pull out the formation and keep a sufficient distance from it. I will limit its movements as much as possible. You are ready to attack, Kaylan shouted loudly, flicking his arm hard, and the grenade that had long been pulled off the ring was struck. After passing a long arc, it landed right at the pilot's feet. Bang, the grenade exploded immediately upon impact, but the grenade produced neither shockwaves nor flying metal fragments. Only a large amount of plastic foam spewed out from the burst body, and soon it wrapped half of the pilot's body. This is a non-lethal grenade, which is filled with several prepared chemical agents. After detonating, these substances will react quickly to generate a large amount of high-strength sticky foam. This kind of plastic foam is generally used to support collapsed tunnels or ceiling breaches, but are also used to capture living biological samples. The plastic foam solidified quickly, which suddenly stopped the pilot's momentum. He fell to the ground and struggled wildly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Asano Akira quickly stepped forward. With a flash of the sword, one of the pilot's legs was separated from the torso, and then 2 more swords were used to cut off the opponent's arms respectively. "Do you want to stay alive?" Asano Akira asked Ivan, but before the latter could reply, the pilot who fell to the ground had already broken free from the shackles of the plastic foam and quickly moved away from Asano Akira. "Want to run?" Akira Asano subconsciously wanted to pursue him, but in the next second, he suddenly took a dozen steps back and slashed at the ground opposite with the sword in his hand, splashing large amounts of sticky pus. Only then did everyone realize that just when their attention was attracted by the resurrected pilot, a thick layer of fleshy fungi had spread silently from under the high platform and now occupied most of the space in the cave. This thing, if I read it correctly, should be the bloodthirsty carpet cultivated by the Alpha planet. They will eat up all the organic matter they can come into contact with. If they don't want to turn it into fertilizer, then thousands of don't get caught by this thing. The hound's expression was extremely serious. I have seen a video recording of a thunder beast that accidentally entered a valley covered by a carpet of germs. In less than 5 minutes, the whole big beast was killed. Not a single residue of digestion is left. Look. The fungus has attacked that guy. Layton pointed straight ahead and saw that the fungus was tightly wrapped around the pilot's body, and part of it even eroded along the wounds on the severed limbs. It seems that this guy is going to become fertilizer for the bacteria carpet, the hound sighed. Although the pilot had become an enemy at this time, it was still a pity that he could not take his body back. Of course, the loss that part of the reward also made him feel distressed. But at this time, Kaylan discovered something unusual. No. The fungus carpet did not regard it as prey. Look, those fungus carpets are withering. Just as Kaylan said, the fungus blanket wrapped around the pilot's body has lost its activity at this moment, and has cracked into dry and hard fragments and scattered. However, the pilot's chopped off arms and one leg were actually lost in this very short time. The inside grew again. Not only that, compared to the part that was chopped off, the new limbs were stronger. The surface of the body was even covered with a layer of gray-white exoskeleton, and the 10 fingers were simply replaced with 2 pairs of sharp bone claws. The creep is not hunting, but supporting this monster. It can use the material and energy absorbed by the creep for its own use, constantly repairing and evolving. What a troublesome thing. The hound said through gritted teeth, it would be great if there were incendiary bombs. Burn all this carpet, then this guy would be much easier to deal with. There are no incendiary bombs, but fortunately we have enough energy crystals, Kaylan said suddenly. As a top equipment engineer, Layton immediately understood Ian's thoughts and couldn't help but said, "You mean, use the energy released when the converter is overloaded to create a big explosion?" "Yes. This will not only clear the germ carpet here, but also probably kill the monster directly," Kaylan nodded. "Isn't this too crazy? Even I am not sure how to control the power of the explosion. If this place blows up, won't we all be buried with this monster?" Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 22. Besides this, do you have any better way? Kaylan asked. At this time, Yvonne suddenly interjected, "Kaylan is right. If the carpet continues to provide it with nutrients, no one can say what it will evolve into in the end. At that time, our chances of winning will only be even lower. The so-called converter overload actually means pushing the operating power of the crystal energy converter to the limit when the safety limit valve is released. In this case, the entire converter will be in an extremely unstable state. If the supplying energy is like inflating a balloon that has been stretched to its maximum, there is only one final result: explosion. There used to be hunters who used bombs made from converters to open up pathways when they had to, but unfortunately, those who did this were either caught in the aftermath of the explosion, or were directly buried alive by large-scale landslides. Very few people can escape alive. In the final analysis, the main reason for these tragedies is that this bomb has no specifications. No one can give out the time of detonation, the power of the explosion, or the scope of the impact. An accurate parameter can only be estimated based on feeling. Since you all said so, let's take a gamble. Layton took a deep breath and pulled out an egg-shaped metal device from his body. This is the main power furnace of his mechanical prosthetic body. There are 6 built-in crystal energy converters, all of which are high-end products with a conversion rate of up to 90%. As soon as the power furnace was separated from his body, his tall body suddenly shrank, half kneeling on the ground, and stretched out the hand holding the power furnace. I have already removed the safety valve. As long as there are enough crystals, this thing it can explode. Yes, Kaylan took the power furnace and stuffed more than a dozen high-level crystals into it in one breath. Suddenly the entire power furnace trembled violently, and strong white light continued to spurt out from the joints of the metal parts. It seems to be boiling. Take Layton with you, we have to hide outside the giant door, Kaylan shouted. The shell of the power furnace has begun to disintegrate, and a large number of cracks have appeared on the inner wall of the converter. This thing can happen at any time, turn into a mini version of a supernova. Ivan and the Hound immediately ran back, dragging the immobile Layton, while Asano Akira waved the war blade to clean up the spreading fungus while slowly retreating. The pilot has now completely transformed into an inhuman monster. A thick layer of black cuticle has completely covered its body. A layer of hard exoskeleton has been added to the vital parts, and a large number of sharp bone punctures have been added. The body came out, and at the same time the tail vertebrae began to grow crazily, forming a long and spinny tail like a steel whip. If it is allowed to continue to evolve, I am afraid that even Asano Akira will no longer be its opponent. Asano Akira, let's retreat. Seeing that Layton and others had left the cave, Kaylan quickly shouted to Asano Akira, who was behind him. At the same time, he slammed the power furnace towards the pilot, then turned around and ran away. Boom! Accompanying the heat wave was an extremely powerful shock wave. Kaylan felt as if someone pushed him hard from behind. His whole body flew off the ground on his toes in an instant, and then he was overturned on the ground. On the ground, he was thrown and rolled out for more than 10 meters. Hiss! Severe pain came from all parts of the body, and Kaylan didn't know how many somersaults he had turned and how many bones he had broken. This is really embarrassing. Everything in the movie is indeed a lie. What does real men never look back to see explosions mean? That's simply because the bombs used by real men are too weak. If you have the ability, try physically dropping a big Ivan. A pair of number 105 military boots appeared in front of Ian's eyes. Immediately afterwards, Kaylan felt that he was being carried up, walked about 10 meters, and was placed on the ground again. Before he could get up, a pair of hands held him down again. Amidst Ian's screams, the hands quickly touched him all over. Okay, stop screaming. I checked it for you and found that none of the bones were broken, only some superficial abrasions and soft tissue contusions. The bones are not broken. Kaylan was stunned and seemed to have forgotten the pain for a moment. Is the bomb powerful enough? Is the guy dead? Is there still a carpet of bacteria? He died completely. The person who spoke this time was Hound. That guy saw you throwing the power furnace out and actually jumped on it. Wow, that was so miserable. His head was blown to pieces. As for those germs, the blanket withered quickly after it died. Although I don't know why, in short, we won the bet. I feel like I almost donated myself. Kaylan stood up with some difficulty, gritted his teeth and moved his hands and feet. However, the severe pain in his ankles immediately made him groan again. Why are you screaming like a bitch? If Natasha had such a small injury, she wouldn't even frown. Ivan handed over a metal can with some disgust. Pain relief spray. Don't use too much, or you'll lose feeling in your whole leg. After taking the jar, Kaylan asked in confusion, who is Natasha? My girlfriend, Ivan said. You don't do domestic violence often, do you? Otherwise, how do you know that your girlfriend is injured? Without frowning, after spraying a few times, Kaylan threw the can back and said angrily. Oh, I forgot to mention, she is the champion of the 26th and 27th Women's Free Fighting Competition of Noah's Ark, Ivan said with some pride. I suddenly feel that it's not your girlfriend that I need to worry about, but you. After briefly treating his injuries, Kaylan limped to the giant door. Looking up, he saw a large pit 4 to 5 meters in diameter and half a meter deep on the ground 200 meters away. The edges were stained with a lot of charred minced meat, as the hound said. Not even a single corpse of the monster at the center of the explosion was left behind. The target had been confirmed dead, and Ian's eyes subconsciously turned to the sarcophagus on the high platform. He could feel that there seemed to be something inside the sarcophagus, vaguely calling to him. Of course, this feeling is not unique to him. Every hunter present is staring at the sarcophagus at this moment. After all, the entire cave is almost empty except for the high platform and the pillars around the high platform. To say that there can be any good thing can only be found in that sarcophagus. I just don't know if the Alpha people have the custom of taking valuable treasures as funerary objects. If so, I will definitely make a lot of money this time. Hound murmured. If he hadn't had to support Leighton, he would have been buried long ago. Already rushed to the high platform. Are you so sure that thing is a coffin? Yvonne glanced at him. We don't know whether there is a coffin in the Alpha civilization. From my perspective, it is more likely that this thing is an operating table. The side effects of chemotherapy happened again today. The drug will damage the peripheral nerves in the hands. My hands were numb all day long, and I couldn't type properly. The updates in the past 2 days may be a little watery. Please bear with me. I should have both hands tomorrow. Update, and the first copy is almost over. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 23. Whether it's a coffin or an operating table, you'll know if you go up and take a look. If I hadn't been unable to move now, I would have been the first to rush up, Leighton said a little weakly. Losing the main power furnace, plus the body part of the upper body was seriously injured. Apart from being still conscious, there was not much difference from Jolajito, who had been in a deep coma. Yvonne, let's go up and have a look, Kaylan said. If you say you don't feel itchy right now, you must be lying. I'm also curious about what's inside. Yes, Yvonne took out 2 pairs of gloves from his pocket and threw 1 pair to Kaylan. Don't be careless. On Earth, the emperors of the old era especially liked to set traps in their coffins, just to kill the tomb robbers who were blinded by greed at the last moment, Hound said. Don't worry, we are not the kind of rookies who have just entered the industry, Kaylan said, taking out a folded metal rod from his backpack, and then glued a mirror to the end of the metal rod with all-purpose glue. This task should have been it is completed by a drone equipped with a high-definition camera, but when most of the equipment is lost, this simplified version can only be used as a substitute. Kaylan and Yvonne climbed up to the high platform with the help of suction cups. Compared with the previous long-distance perspective, the sarcophagus in front of them completely showed the heavy texture. This sarcophagus is 5 meters long and more than 3 meters long. It is wide and nearly 1.5 meters tall. The material used is similar to the rocks in the cave, but the surface has a special layer of luster. It should be that some metal elements were incorporated during the production. There are no words or patterns carved on the outside of the sarcophagus, but there are a row of evenly spaced round holes. It is completely unknown whether these round holes are used for drainage, ventilation, or slots for some additional components. The sarcophagus had no lid, but Kaylan and Yvonne did not stand directly on the edge of the sarcophagus to look inside. Instead, they stuck out the metal rod with the mirror attached to it and used the image reflected on the mirror to observe the inside of the sarcophagus. Hiss. Kaylan couldn't help but take a breath when he saw the image on the mirror. Inside the sarcophagus was a pool of viscous plasma, and there were many broken organ fragments soaked in the plasma. From time to time, there would be a few bubbles popped up from the bottom and popped. It's normal. After all, that monster crawled out from here. No matter what it looks like in the sarcophagus, I am mentally prepared as a doctor. Yvonne did not have any extreme reaction to such a scene. Yes, ask a few more people to come up to help. collect some samples first, and then clean out these dirty things. Fortunately, everyone carried a mini suction pump among the equipment. Although the tube was blocked countless times by caked blood scabs and minced meat, after half an hour of hard work, the dirty blood in the sarcophagus was finally pumped out. All cleaned up. This thing seems to be a stone tablet. Since there are no remains of alpha aliens in the sarcophagus, there are no priceless burial objects. There is only a 1-meter square stone tablet, which is densely covered with the words of Alpha civilization. It's Alpha, this must have thousands of characters, Hound exclaimed. Although relics involving documents are of little use to hunters like them, the official purchase price offered by ARC is very high. It is high, and it is also very helpful for the hunter's qualification level evaluation. The higher the qualification level, the more missions you can choose, and the higher the guaranteed reward you can get for each mission. Kaylan, the two of us are going to lift this stone tablet out. Ivan and Asano Akira will catch it on top, everyone must be careful. The price difference between a complete thing and a damaged one is at least 5 to 6 times. The Hound said and asked Kaylan to climb into the coffin together. Hunters have a complete process for handling documentary relics. They first take pictures, then use a resin film to make a rubbing, and finally wrap it with an antioxidation film and transfer it out. The process of taking pictures and rubbing went smoothly, but when the antioxidation film was being applied, an accident suddenly happened. Since the antioxidation film was very thin and could not leave any gap between it and the stone tablet, Kaylan had to take off the gloves. However, when his fingertips just touched the stone tablet, the entire stone tablet was completely invisible. Broken without warning. Ah! Ian's eyes widened in an instant, and he froze in place. His lips began to tremble slightly, and his whole body twitched as if he was electrocuted. It actually broke, what a pity. It seems that the stone itself has weathered, huh? Kaylan, are you okay? I don't blame you for this, really. The Hound thought that Kaylan was confused because the stone tablet suddenly broke, but in fact, at that moment, a large amount of information from unknown sources poured into his head like a torrent. He was not shocked because of the stone tablet, but because of the stone tablet. I was stunned by this sudden information. What is this? His head was swollen and painful, and countless strange pictures flashed before his eyes like slides. A kind of knowledge that he had never been exposed to before was forcibly instilled into his mind. This method was just like what was described in martial arts novels from the old era. Just like the initiation, Ian's self-defense was easily destroyed by this uninvited guest, and in the blink of an eye, there was a stormy sea in the sea of consciousness. What's wrong? Is it a side effect of the previous medicine? Hound immediately ran to Ian's side and held his shoulders as soon as he realized something was wrong. It's not like a side effect of medicine. Ivan shook his head. This symptom is a bit like a tumor compressing the nerves in the head. Don't be ridiculous. A person with a brain tumor can't even pass the physical examination. How can he pass the hunter registration? Hound retorted, but when he saw saliva starting to drip from the corner of Ian's mouth, his expression became suspicious. Stand up. This guy, could he have some hidden nervous system disease, which is usually invisible, but he received too much stimulation today and suddenly broke out, right? Just when the Hound and Ivan didn't know what to do with Kaylan, the storm in Ian's mind finally stopped. However, what made him unbelievable was that the piece that had just been implanted in his mind turned out to be what's on the stone tablet. He actually has the ability to read the Alpha civilization's text. But despite this, he can only read, but it is difficult to translate it in human language. The language of Alpha civilization is really weird, whether from the perspective of natural language or programming language, there is no similarity at all. It is completely inconsistent with the logic that an information carrier should have. It is simply impossible to understand it using the human way of thinking. It has no concept of vocabulary and sentences, and the combination of characters is also impossible. There are no rules at all. The same character appears in different places and has completely different meanings. Rather than comparing it to a password or a code word, Kaylan feels that it is a kind of transmission on a conscious level. He can only understand what these characters want to convey through his own ability, but he cannot teach the method of reading these characters to another person by any means. For example, these characters are on this stone tablet. This means that if they change places, even if factors such as the size, number, and arrangement of the characters remain completely unchanged, the meanings they represent will also change. If a human wants to learn the language of Alpha civilization, I am afraid that the only way is to receive an initiation type of information shock like what Kaylan just experienced. Kaylan suddenly thought of a very old proverb: it can only be understood, not expressed. These 8 words are so appropriate to describe the language of Alpha civilization. The text engraved on the stone tablet is actually a long and strange prayer. The main idea is that the Alpha civilization believes in a certain God, and that God has many powerful and even terrifying enemies. The relationship between the gods of the Alpha civilization and these enemies, the war, has been going on for countless thousands of years. These devout believers want to help their gods, but with their abilities, they are simply unable to intervene in that level of war. Therefore, the Alpha civilization can only find another way and use. Next, it is a large piece of content that Kaylan can read but cannot understand. It probably involves the secret technology of Alpha civilization, an attempt to create warriors powerful enough to intervene in the war between gods. In addition, the words dedication and sacrifice appear many times throughout the prayer, but the content is too fragmented and the context in many places cannot be connected at all. Kaylan can read this part of the content, less than 1/10 of the entire prayer. Create a powerful warrior? Kaylan couldn't help but think of the resurrected pilot, and the pieces of meat sealed in ice in the hallucination. But, what is the God that Alpha civilization believes in? Is it a higher level cosmic civilization? And who are the so-called enemies of the gods? The amount of information contained in this prayer was so huge that Kaylan felt that his brain was running out of energy. Hey! Kaylan! Don't scare people. Hey! Your saliva is about to drip onto the coffin board. The hound slapped Kaylan on the back, finally interrupting his thoughts. Kaylan staggered when he woke up and almost fell to his knees in the sarcophagus. Huh. Kaylan panted heavily. His underwear was completely soaked with sweat. His body was almost exhausted, but his heartbeat remained at a frequency of more than 200 beats per minute. For humans who have undergone biochemical modification, this data is already very close to the limit. Are you okay? Do you want another shot of sedative? Yvonne looked at Ian's pale face and asked. I'm fine. If you give me another injection, I might be something. Kaylan waved his hand and said. After a short period of thinking, he decided to keep the matter a secret. He knew that if the news that he could read Alpha civilization's text was leaked, the best outcome for him would be to be sent to the dissecting table for study, and his brain is a living CPU that will be processed into a super translation computer. Whether in the old era or the new era, individual human rights and lives have always been insignificant when it comes to the future of all mankind. The so-called trolley problem actually has an optimal solution. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 24. At this moment, a rustle of friction between rocks came from the top of the cave. Everyone looked up and found that a new passage appeared directly above the high platform, and a ray of light was projected from the passage. Exit. It's the exit, Hound shouted happily. I can finally leave this hellish place. All the girls in the North 3rd District are waiting for me. I will pamper you all when I get back. All of them? Old dog, are you sure? You won't even let go of those things that cost 50 points of credit once, Layton said with a somewhat narrow smile. Thinking of being able to go out right away, everyone's nerves that had been tense finally it's a little more relaxed. If you keep beeping for me, I won't even let you go. While Leighton couldn't move, the old dog kicked him hard on the butt. Just that, toothpick of yours. Leighton was a little disdainful. There is an old Chinese saying, when a tiger falls flat, it will be bullied by a dog. Just wait for me. Believe it or not, I will give you the toothpick when I am healed. You hang it on the solar photovoltaic panel. Okay, if you want to have sex, wait until you get back to Ark. I can even sponsor a free anal enlargement surgery. But now, you'd better find a way to get out of here. Ivan interrupted the two of them. He argued, pointing to the exit above his head, there are currently two seriously injured people who cannot move, Leighton and Zwilligii. They cannot use climbing suction cups, so we can only go up first and then use ropes to lift them out. Also, Laugo and Asano Akira lost their protective suits. It's okay underground. If they reach the surface, the radiation intensity will become stronger. I'm worried that they won't be able to withstand it, Kaylan interjected. Then we can only go out first and find a way to get in touch with Ark, Ivan said. According to the original flight schedule of the transport plane, Ark may not know that something happened to us. Is there a radio? Kaylan asked. There is a set that was removed from the wreckage of the transport aircraft, but the power may be a little small, Hound said, taking out a metal box from the backpack whose shell had obviously suffered a serious collision. It is the most basic model, or from second-hand goods that have been eliminated from other vehicles. The damn logistics department just wants to save budget at this critical moment. Let's make do with it. Kaylan took the metal box. In this way, Ivan and the Hounds stay here to take care of the wounded. Asano Akira and I go out to ask for help. No matter whether we can succeed or not, we will definitely be there within 2 hours. Come back, if we don't come back. Kaylan did not continue, but everyone present knew what it would mean if Kaylan and Asano Akira did not come back within the scheduled time. If the accident really happens, then Ivan and Hound will have no choice but to leave Leighton and Zwilligii behind and leave independently. The cruel test faced by the hunter profession has created an extremely rational way of thinking for them. When it is determined that there is no hope, what they need to do is how to stop the loss in time. It is better for 2 people to have a chance of survival than for all 4 people to die in the ruins. Don't be so pessimistic. I have noticed before that there is a lot of moss growing in the corners of the cave. We can survive at least 3 or 4 days with that and we won't starve to death. Leighton pointed to a patch of grass in the distance. Fluorescence said. But they all know that all plants or fungi that emit fluorescence on Alpha Planet basically contain a high dose of radiation in their bodies. Eating these things to satisfy hunger is equivalent to drinking poison to quench thirst. Leighton said this, just to comfort them. That's all. You can't spit out ivory from your dog's mouth, and you talk depressing words all day long. The Hound scolded angrily. Okay, you go quickly. By the way, the mission report seems to mention that there are indigenous creatures in the snow-capped mountains. There are signs of activity. It should be a large reptile. Please be careful. Yes, Kaylan nodded. Of course he had read the mission report carefully. Judging from the traces captured by the drones, it should be a subspecies of earth-moving dragon called snow dragon. The name sounds like it's very fantasy, but this dragon can neither use magic nor breathe fire. Its wings are highly degraded and it can't even fly. At most, it can only use the terrain to glide short distances. To put it bluntly, it is a dragon that can adapt to low temperatures and high temperatures. Just a clumsy lizard in a radiation environment. Since the oxygen content of Alpha Star's atmosphere is much higher than that of Earth, the indigenous organisms on this planet are relatively large in size. Even bugs are dozens of times larger than similar species on Earth, such as the Schizognathus. This species is already considered one of the smallest species among indigenous creatures. However, what makes human biologists a little strange is that the brain capacity of the indigenous creatures on Alpha Planet is not much higher than that of Earth creatures. Logically speaking, it is impossible for an environment like Alpha Planet to evolve for such a long time. Alpha civilization, an intelligent species, was born. Assume that the Alpha civilization has wiped out all other intelligent species on the planet, but tens of thousands of years have passed since the Alpha civilization disappeared. However, according to biologists' investigations and anatomy results, these wandering animals have disappeared during these tens of thousands of years. The indigenous creatures on Alpha Planet have not evolved at all. This conclusion is extremely absurd, but it is indeed true. It seems that the genetic sequence of all living things on this planet has been completely locked, and everything was still frozen tens of thousands of years ago, during the period when the Alpha civilization disappeared. The passage at the top of the cave is very short. It takes less than 50 meters to reach the exit. The cold wind mixed with snow and hail continues to flow into the passage. Fortunately, the suction force of the climbing suction cup is strong enough, so Kaylan and Asano Akira can strengthen it. Climb out against the strong wind. The previous judgment was very accurate. The core area of the A-087 ruins is indeed located in the heart of the snow mountain, and the exit of this passage is just a little above the mountainside, about 1/3 of the way to the top of the mountain. We have to set up a radio on the top of the mountain so that the signal can travel far enough, Kaylan said, trying to take a few steps forward, but soon, the thick snow had already covered his thighs. Under such circumstances, it was simply impossible to move forward. It would be nice to have a sled, but, wait, am I right? Isn't that our cargo hold? Kaylan complained while looking around, but when he turned his eyes to the west side of the hillside, but the whole person was completely stunned. The cargo hold that was torn from the transport plane was now mostly buried in the snow. Various equipment was scattered on the ground. A giant lizard with white scales was tearing at a supply made of reinforced engineering plastic with its claws. Box, and behind it, there were already 3 identical supply boxes that had been torn apart in this violent way, leaving them in a complete mess. It's the snow dragon. That guy is stealing our supplies. Kaylan can be said to be extremely unhappy at this moment. Since the crash, they have to live with their belts tightened, and they only have enough money. Some supplies had to be carefully calculated and used, but no one expected that most of the lost supplies ended up in the belly of this lizard. Is it in that direction? Akira Asano asked Kaylan, facing the west hillside. The sound of the wind and snow is very loud, and I can't hear many small noises clearly. Well, it should be a newly adult snow dragon, about 6 meters long. Can you fight in this situation? Kaylan glanced at Asano Akira with a little worry. It will be affected to some extent, but as long as I get close enough, I can hear it. As soon as he finished speaking, Asano Akira suddenly jumped up and started running quickly on the snow. If Kaylan hadn't been sharp-eyed and saw that Akira Asano had tied the carbon fiber plates used to support the backpack to the solace of his shoes, he would have almost thought that the light skill of walking on snow without leaving a trace in martial arts novels had reappeared. This big lizard is probably going to be in bad luck. However, his smile froze in the next second. Asano Akira, be careful. There is a bigger one, it is behind the cargo hold, at your 2 o'clock direction. In the blink of an eye, Asano Akira was caught in the attack of 2 snow dragons, and what was even more terrible was that the second snow dragon spread its wings and suddenly jumped into the air. It's a mutant. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 25. At this critical moment, 2 red laser beams suddenly fell from the sky, directly piercing the vital points of the 2 snow dragons. The huge bodies slammed to the ground heavily, stirring up a large amount of broken snow. Kaylan looked up and saw a Raven-class high-speed fighter hovering directly above them. It was the main weapon Bavar 2 equipped with the Raven class that had just killed the 2 snow dragons. Type Laser Cannon. This is Unit 1019 of the 9th Quick Response Team of ARC's 4th Cruise Fleet. It is performing Search and Rescue Mission 847. The unknown persons below, please send your identification code within 20 seconds. If the communication equipment is damaged, please wave your left hand. After signaling 3 times, he squatted on the ground with his head in his hands. Rescue team. Why did it come so soon? Kaylan was stunned for a moment, but he still passed on his identification code. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if the pilot judged it as a non-friendly unit. Noah's Ark is not the only human force on Alpha Planet. In the past 50 years, more than 100,000 people may have left the Ark. Among these people, some were convicted of deportation, some were death row inmates who escaped from prison, and some were bankrupts who had no other choice. In addition to these forced ones, there were also those who left the Ark voluntarily, explorers, speculators, and the concept of the Ark. Totally out of touch social activists and so on. On the Ark, these people who left had a unified name: exiles. Without the protection of the Ark, it is very difficult for the exiles to survive on the crisis-ridden Alpha Planet. More than 70% of the exiles cannot survive the first night after leaving the Ark, and among the remaining people, only one can survive for a month. It is even rarer. Anyone who can survive outside the Ark for a long time must have strong strength and careful thinking. Of course, the most important thing is good luck. The vast majority of the exiles hate Ark, and a small group of people are even keen on various sabotage actions against Ark. If the pilot of a fighter jet thinks that he is an exile, Kaylan believes that he will definitely not do anything. Press the fire button hesitantly. The identification code has been confirmed. After a short pause, the cold mechanical voice turned into the driver's own voice. Do you still have the ability to move? I will lower the rope ladder and take you to the nearest transfer station. Wait a minute, we still have wounded people inside the ruins. Kaylan quickly turned on the radio and said to the fighter pilot. Injured? In the ruins? Aren't you hunters exploring the ruins of a -087? Didn't you encounter a crash? The pilot's tone was full of doubts. Unlucky, the plane crashed directly into the ruins, and we finally found the exit, Kaylan said truthfully. Okay, report the casualties, and I will ask the transfer station to arrange medical personnel and facilities. A transport plane pilot and a hunter died, and the bodies cannot be recovered for the time being. One hunter was seriously injured and comatose, with massive blood loss, and urgently needed amputation surgery. A fourth-level biochemically modified person was seriously injured, multiple organs needed to be replaced, and the main power furnace was lost. 2 others were poisoned, and their current conditions are stable. I understand, my fighter jet can't accommodate so many people. I will contact a transport plane for you and arrive within 10 minutes. After the pilot finished speaking, the Raven-class fighter circled in the sky for 2 times and then left directly. However, what surprised Kaylan was that what came to pick them up 10 minutes later was not the transport plane the fighter pilot called it, but an Iris-class light battleship, which is the smallest among Ark's main battleships. However, despite this, the length of the Iris-class battleship is still more than 380 meters, equipped with 64 large turbine engine sets, and the weapons and armor are completely different from those of fighter jets. Even Layton couldn't help but said, "This is really a grand occasion, a warship was dispatched to pick us up. This is the first time I have enjoyed this kind of treatment." That's because you are the only survivors we found during this search and rescue operation. The speaker was a middle-aged officer who came forward to greet them. He was wearing the blue and gray uniform of the Ark 4th Cruise Fleet. He wears a red uniform, a military cap, and the 2 winged silver stars on his epaulets show that he is a genuine Air Force lieutenant colonel. I am the captain of this warship and the most senior officer responsible for conducting this search and rescue operation, the lieutenant colonel added. This search and rescue operation, does this mean there are other victims besides us? Kaylan asked. Yes, there were a total of 17 transport aircraft accidents this time, and they were all concentrated in this area. Otherwise, we would not have appeared here in such a timely manner. According to the analysis of the staff department, the cause of this serial crash was the man behind this is likely to be an extreme exile force. Damn, these bastards have become more and more courageous in recent years. When I was a soldier, they would run away as far as they saw us, Hound cursed angrily. He originally thought the plane had crashed. It was just an accident, but now someone actually told him that it was most likely a man-made conspiracy. This was really unbearable. The specific situation is still under investigation. Don't worry yet, the captain said. The unconscious hunter has been sent to the medical cabin on the battleship. The medical conditions at the transfer station are not as good as here. I will send you directly return to Ark, and there will be dedicated staff to hand over to you. By the way, I heard that you have also entered the core area of the A-087 ruins. Yes, but there is not much oil and water. The only thing that seems valuable is a stone tablet, and it is broken. The Hound was a little depressed. Although their harvest from this trip has far exceeded expectations, you must know that any ruins, regardless of what level is it. All the hunters who entered the core area in the first team, without exception, all made a lot of money. Even if it is described as getting rich overnight, it is not an exaggeration to describe it. Earning enough for retirement in one trip is enough. There are many people who quit. Compared with them, the harvest this time is really not enough. The value of documentary relics fluctuates greatly. Since it is something found in the core area, the reward given by the research department will not be low. Okay, you guys have a short rest here, I have to arrange the next action process. The captain comforted the Hound and left. For a while, only Kaylan and the others were left in the lounge. Zwilajitu is being rescued in the medical cabin, and Leighton probably needs to be returned to the factory for overhaul. Both Yvonne and the Hound have undergone a comprehensive examination. The remaining toxins in the blood are already very small. It will only take a while. The bodies purified themselves. As for Akira Asano and Kaylan, most of them had skin injuries and they would be fine after simple treatment. I really came back with my life. The Hound sighed and stretched hard. Actually, I think there are still many problems in that ruins. Leighton interjected, but was quickly interrupted by the Hound. Which ruins have fewer problems? How many ruins are there that can be thoroughly understood by us humans so far? Don't worry about it here. This kind of thing is not something we need to worry about. I will do it now. I just want to go back to my bed and have a good sleep. The Hound yawned and continued, well, now that we have escaped, the ruins have nothing to do with us. You said before that I was suspicious, and you yourself aren't you looking like this? On one side, Leighton and Hound were still chatting without a word, while on the other side, Kaylan was sitting in his seat, checking his equipment silently, while thinking about what happened not long ago. Reading the words of Alpha Civilization, this is an incredible ability. He knows very well how much contribution this ability can bring to mankind. However, he cannot do this. If he really confessed, how would Fang Zhou treat him, or to put it another way, how would he deal with him? At that time, his life no longer belongs to him, but the wealth belonging to all mankind. Well. At this moment, the movements in his hands suddenly stopped. His left hand was holding a pistol, and his right hand was holding a magazine with only one bullet left. Kaylan remembered clearly that he never fired a single shot, whether when facing the resurrected pilot or when encountering the snow dragon on the mountain. When setting off, the magazine must be full. When was that bullet used? Old dog, have I ever fired a gun before? Kaylan looked at the Hound beside him and asked. Shoot? Why do you ask? Nothing, just asking. The parasitic girl was killed by Yvonne. You didn't fire, there should be no slit jaws either. Bullets have little effect on those things. As for when you faced that monster later, did you fire? I didn't notice the gun, Hound said as he recalled. The monster in his mouth naturally refers to the pilot who was resurrected from the sarcophagus. Have any of you ever used my gun? It certainly didn't. If that's the case, why is there only one bullet left in the magazine? When did he fire the gun? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 26. Bullets, shooting, enemies, monsters. As the blurry memories became clear again, Ian's breathing became heavier. The pieces of flesh that turned into human shapes, the eyeballs moving in the ice, the giant centipede made of flesh and blood, none of this is an illusion. These things are all true. They are not hallucinations. He fired. In the stone room, he fired at the centipede-like monster. Lan subconsciously grasped the armrest of the seat, and the gun in his hand fell to the metal floor with a crisp sound. What's wrong with you? You don't seem to be feeling well, Hound asked. Everyone had a checkup when we came here, aren't there any problems? It's just a little exhausted. Lan responded quickly. Exhaustion? Your behavior doesn't look like collapse, it looks like epilepsy. Ivan raised his eyebrows. Although this is not my area of expertise, I know a doctor who is very good at treating epilepsy. Forget it, I'm afraid I'll have to be cured even if I'm not sick. Lan pretended to be relaxed and calmly wiped away a thin bead of sweat on his forehead. If those hallucinations are real, then why are everyone else's memories distorted except for yourself? If it was just amnesia, that would make sense, but the problem is, when I originally encountered those hallucinations, other people had completely different and clear memories, as if I suddenly traveled to a parallel time and space where the script had been fine-tuned. In those few hours, Lan and others experienced completely different plots. This is impossible. Lan was basically certain that what he saw and heard was definitely not an illusion. The missing bullets in the magazine were the most powerful evidence, but what about the others? Taking a step back, assuming that other people's memories have been modified, but those test tubes containing blood specimens that Lan watched Ivan put into his pocket, why did they disappear? Could it be that Ivan unconsciously discarded the specimen test tube in order to justify his theory? But how to explain that stone room? There are many reasons why the monster's body disappeared, but how did the wall that was originally covered with knife marks be restored? How could the big hole in the ceiling of the stone chamber disappear out of thin air? There are so many things that don't make sense. Just when Lan felt his head begin to hurt again, a sweet voice suddenly came from directly in front, interrupting his thoughts. The captain asked me to deliver food to you. Lan raised his head and saw a female orderly wearing a skirt uniform and with short light brown hair appearing at the door of the lounge carrying a tray with 5 boxes of steaming meals. Oh, just leave it here, thank you. Ivan quickly pointed to the coffee table in the middle of the lounge. These foods are all made in the kitchen at short notice. They may be a bit crude. I hope you don't dislike it. The girl looked very young, as if she had just joined the army. There was a hint of embarrassment in both her movements and her tone, especially after being surrounded by several people. Under the scorching eyes of the big men, he was constantly looking at me. Why would you dislike it? Haha, it's better to have a mouthful of hot rice than to eat compressed biscuits. In order to relieve the embarrassment, Hound stood up with a smile. He seemed to want to pat the orderly's shoulder, but was stopped by him. The latter ducked away in a panic. If nothing happens, well, I'll go out first. The orderly said stutteringly, turned around and ran away. Hee, Leighton, I dare to bet you that this girl is definitely a baby. As soon as the orderly walked out, the Hound immediately put on a lustful and lewd expression. It's none of your business. Do you think people think highly of you? Leighton said angrily, lying sprawled on the seat. Even if you can't succeed, it's still good to feast your eyes. If you ask me, the guy who designed uniforms for the Air Force must be an old pervert. Look at the uniform skirt. Although the hem hangs down to the knees, there are slits on both sides. But it reached right up to the thighs, and there were big V-neck tops and low-cut shirts. Gee, you could see that wonderful Kenyan at a glance, especially when she just leaned over to put the tray. The child's development is really good now. I saw it, it's pink, and it has lace. Leighton waved his only hand with a dull look on his face. Damn it, didn't you also read it? Why are you still pretending that sex is empty? Could it be that you are withered? Hound jumped to the sofa on one side angrily. Okay, everyone knows you are an old pervert. Hurry up and eat. If you don't eat, you will get cold. Leighton picked his nose. By the way, I can't move. Old dog, please help me get one. Bring the lunch box. You just know how to call me. Despite the scolding, Hound still took a box of food and handed it to Leighton. Although the orderly said it was made on the spur of the moment, the meal was actually quite sumptuous, with vegetables, meat, and even a poached egg for each person. The vegetables are fresh, very different from the kimchi and pickles in cans, and the meat is not the common soy protein synthetic meat, but genuine pork belly, 30% lean and 70% fat, and even the poached eggs are runny. Damn, the Air Force is really a master. We in the Army were born from our stepmother. The food they eat is better than what we had during the holidays. Hound complained as he took big mouthfuls of food. Don't talk while eating, or you might choke, Yvonne said. He was not used to using chopsticks, but fortunately there were 2 spare spoons on the tray. Cough, 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 don't curse me. Water, is there any water? Just when the Hound raised his head and looked for water, there was a strong shaking. A piece of braised pork dipped in thick oil and red sauce rolled out of his lunch box, fell to the ground, and bounced forward several times. Cough, 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 my flesh, cough, cough. Boom, there was another shaking, accompanied by a dull explosion. Explosion? What happened? Kaylan and Yvonne stood up from their seats at the same time, while Asano Akira subconsciously put his hand on the handle of the knife. Ahem, let's go to the bridge and have a look. I'm afraid we're in trouble. The Hound stopped looking for water and got up and walked outside. Why are you here? Seeing several hunters rushing into the bridge without saying hello, the lieutenant colonel and captain naturally looked a little unhappy, but he did not get angry, but his tone seemed a little stiff. The Hound chuckled and said, is it the Exiles' anti-aircraft firepower? How do you know? You guessed it. The Hound stroked the stubble on his chin with some pride. I have been dealing with these bastards for several years, and I am very aware of their little tricks. It is indeed those Exiles. The battleship was hit by 2 rockets of unknown type. Fortunately, the power was very small and did not penetrate the armor. Now the energy shield has been opened. The captain frowned and pointed. The screen on the side is the picture captured by the external camera. In an open river valley, several people wearing khaki camouflage cloaks are running wildly, and several empty rocket launchers are thrown on the ground not far away. Isn't this a living target? Why don't you fight back? The Hound asked. Please don't command me. The lieutenant colonel glanced at the Hound, and then said with some embarrassment, it's not that I don't want to fight back. All the carrier-based aircraft on the ship have been sent out to perform rescue missions, and there are no aircraft on this battleship. Equipped with close-in defense artillery, the only ground strike weapons are attack missiles. The problem is that this river valley is very strange, shrouded in a field of extremely strong electromagnetic interference, and the missiles cannot lock onto the target. Then let them run away like this? Kaylan couldn't help but ask. In his impression, the soldiers on the Ark did not have such a good temper of not fighting back. That's definitely not the case. The battleship is adjusting its angle and intends to use its main gun to wipe out the enemy with one strike. The captain coughed twice and said seriously. When he heard the word main gun, the Hound's expression was quite wonderful. Damn, isn't that a cannon to fight mosquitoes? The main gun of the Iris-class battleship is a small plasma cannon. Although it is small, its power is also extremely terrifying. This thing is neither a laser weapon nor a live ammunition weapon, but uses laser to heat heavy hydrogen to extremely high temperatures. The temperature causes some of the electrons in the atoms to be stripped off, forming a plasma, commonly known as plasma, which is then ejected out of the weapon. Such a ball of plasma is enough to vitrify the entire river valley, and as for the exiles, there won't even be any residue left. With this one shot, at least nearly 1,000 units of crystals will have to be drained. Right, Hound changed the subject. How about this, leave these guys to us, which not only saves energy, but also can get some for interrogation. Live mouth, just in time. I can also vent my anger on these bastards. What do you think? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 27. After hesitating for a full minute, the lieutenant colonel and captain nodded with some difficulty and said, "Okay, that's it. I can assign another 25 Marines to your command, but you need to ensure your own personal safety. If there are casualties, they will be counted as accidents rather than combat losses." No problem, the Hound patted the lieutenant colonel's shoulder readily. Kaylan noticed that the lieutenant colonel originally wanted to avoid it, but in the end he stood still and did not move. It's strange, the lieutenant colonel obviously seemed reluctant, but why did he agree? And he looked like he was afraid of the old dog after leaving the bridge, Kaylan asked with some confusion. "Hey, you don't know this, right?" Layton's voice suddenly came from behind. Kaylan turned his head and saw a huge fuel cell hanging on this guy's chest, with two long wires connected to the original where the power furnace should be. The broken mechanical arm was replaced with a simple light howitzer. A long ammunition belt hung on the shoulder, and the remaining hand held a heavy box of shells. Don't look at this guy who looks like a veteran. He was not a soldier in the army back then, but a senior colonel of the front-line combat troops. He is 2 levels higher than Captain Lashiza. Does this captain dare to pretend in front of him? If he hadn't had such a bad mouth and offended a great person, he wouldn't have retired so early and become a lone hunter. Colonel, Kaylan stared in astonishment at the Hound who was carrying a rapid-fire gauze rifle on his shoulder and whistling. He could not distinguish the soldier, anti-harmony, ruffian in front of him from the colonel. This image of a senior military officer is associated with it. This girl is too magical and realist. Don't mention this old sesame and rotten millet thing. Shut that big mouth of yours. Hound gave Layton a hard look with a look of displeasure on his face. You haven't repaired your scrap iron shell yet. Do you want to go down? You have to know that we people are not included in combat operations. Even if we are killed, we will not get any money. Don't worry about that. As for those stupid marksmanship, they may not be able to hit me if I stand and let them hit me. Okay, you are seeking death yourself. No one can blame anyone if you are shot. Hound said, and took a riot-proof sniper rifle that uses non-lethal anesthetic bullets from the weapon rack, and hung it on his back. Go up, the lieutenant colonel captain was quite happy. In addition to lending Hound 25 Marines, he also opened up the ship's weapons arsenal to them, including a pocket pistol that was small enough to be hidden in the palm of his hand. As large as a complete set of military power armor, it can be said that it has everything you need. Except for Asano Akira, who still held onto his warblade. Kaylan and Ivan also each took a rifle from the shelf. They chose the ARC-01 automatic rifle, commonly known as Type 01, which was used on the ARC, the most common standard firearm. As a resident who grew up on the ARC, Kaylan used this Type 01 when he received basic military training. Compared with other fancy weapons, he still feels that the basic model is the most familiar and convenient. You have good taste. Today's young people like energy weapons that are blinding. If you ask me, the most efficient way to kill people is real bullets. Hound glanced at the two people's choices and nodded appreciatively. The vast majority of individual energy weapons use pulse lasers. Although they are highly accurate, they are not as powerful as live ammunition, and their lethality is also very low. I have treated many wounded people who were hit by counterattacks because they failed to kill the enemy in time. Hit Yvonne said. The laser weapons developed by ARC are roughly divided into two types. One is the cluster type, which is very powerful and consumes a lot of energy. It is usually installed on large equipment, such as the laser cannon used by the previous Raven-class fighter jet to kill 2 snow dragons. Due to the energy supply, the light laser weapons equipped by infantry are basically pulse type. One unit of crystal can fire about 8 to 10 shots, but the power is much smaller than the cluster type, and it is easy to be painted by the anti-beam layer gives restraint. As soon as everyone selected their weapons, a group of fully armed Marines squeezed into the weapons warehouse. The sergeant at the head saluted the Hound with a standard military salute and shouted loudly, "Number 481 Marines of the 4th Cruise Fleet, a small team is reporting to you, please give instructions." "Very good, the boys are very energetic," Hound nodded with satisfaction. In the blink of an eye, his temperament seemed to have changed. With a wave of his hand, a holographic map appeared on the table in the weapons depot. "Time is very tight, let me briefly explain the action process. This is a pursuit operation, the terrain is an open canyon, there are no bunkers, there are 6 enemies, and they are fleeing due north. Our number is 3 times theirs. The above can be divided into 2 batches to outflank them. Half of you will follow this big guy named Layton to chase them away. I will parachute to the front with the remaining people to block their way. There is basically no combat. I won't go into details about the difficulty since you are not newbies, so you should pay attention to it, but one thing I have to remember is that at least 2 people must be left alive. Don't kill them all." "Yes." Due to the fear of hidden anti-aircraft firepower, the battleship must be kept at an altitude of more than 600 meters, so Kaylan and the others can only use glider suits to airborne. Fortunately, hunters also often use this equipment, so it doesn't count. Strangeness. The only thing that made Kaylan feel a little difficult was how to use the weapons in his hands to suppress fire on ground targets while gliding at high speed. Not to mention aiming. In this position, it is extremely difficult to turn the muzzle or pull the trigger. "That's not necessary," said the Hound suddenly. "Nothing is necessary. I mean, there's no need to aim, just hit based on feeling." After saying that, the Hound was the first to jump down holding the gun. "What the old dog means is for you to shoot directly from the waist. Our weapons have all been replaced with large capacity drums, and 1 of every 3 rounds will be a tracer bullet. When the time comes, you can just adjust the trajectory according to the tail light of the tracer bullet. This is a required course for a machine gunner." Layton explained it to Kaylan very carefully, but before Kaylan could ask in detail, he jumped out of the hatch. I've never been a machine gunner." Kaylan weighed the heavy drum and felt a little regretful. If he had known better, he would have stayed on the battleship and rested peacefully. That guy Laugo didn't force them. Come together. Just think of it as revenge for the pilot of the transport plane and Zhonglian." Kaylan gritted his teeth, untied the safety rope around his waist, and jumped out. The location of the attack was right below the battleship. The 6 exiles had already run a full 2 kilometers along the river valley, but based on the speed of the hang gliding suit, it would be enough to catch up with them in less than 10 minutes. First team and second team spread out and act according to the original plan. The Hound's voice came from the earphones. Kaylan folded his arms slightly to reduce the area of wind resistance. His speed suddenly accelerated a bit, heading towards flying to the northeast of the river valley. The team led by Layton had already bitten the exile's tail. They opened the flap on one side, freed one arm, and used the airflow on one side to dive downwards while using the free airflow. The hand that raised the gun and fired. This action is no less than the high-altitude stunt skydiving performance I have seen on TV before. Most of the bullets that fell from the sky hit empty places, but one unlucky guy was still hit in the calf and fell to the ground, turning over several times in a row. Layton and the other two Marines immediately slowed down and began to lower their altitude. Before long, they had landed on the ground and rushed to the side of the injured with their guns in hand. "Old dog, something is wrong," Layton yelled in the communication channel. "These people are not exiles, they have another origin." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 28. What's the meaning? These people came off the Ark, not the exiles from outside. Are you sure? There was a hint of solemnity in Hound's tone. He retracted his flaps and quickly dived in the direction of Layton. Sure. If you don't believe it, come see for yourself, Layton said confidently. Stop chasing, gather your formation, and land. The Hound quickly landed after giving an order, using a few steps to buffer the inertia of the fall, and then quickly ran towards the man who was subdued by Layton. Of prisoners. When he got closer, the Hound realized that the prisoner was about to die. His limbs were twitching constantly, and saliva mixed with white foam overflowed from the corners of his mouth. He opened his eyelids with his hands and saw that his pupils had dilated. I asked you to grab your tongue, why did the person die? The Hound kicked Layton on the knee. At this time, Kaylan also landed on the ground, followed by Ivan. As for Asano Akira, he stayed on the battleship and did not participate in this operation. He took the poison before I even hit the ground. The pill melted as soon as it entered my mouth. I couldn't even pick it out. Layton raised his finger, which was stained with some saliva and a small amount of pasty light yellow powder. Geez, these dead warriors. Hound rubbed the stubble on his chin impatiently. By the way, you just said that this guy is not an exile. Where is the evidence? Look. Layton ripped off the camouflage cloak on the deceased, and saw a set of well-made standard light infantry armor inside. Kaylan had seen this thing in the black market, and it could be sold second-hand. More than 10,000 credits. It's the Ranger Type 4 armor. The exiles really can't afford such a good product. The Hound squatted down and groped around the waist of the corpse. Don't look for it, the production batch and number on it have been scratched off, but I can guarantee that the set of armor is definitely new less than a month after leaving the factory. I can even smell the stamping machine on the armor. The smell of engine oil that's left behind, Layton said. It seems that things are far from that simple, we may be involved in a big trouble. Hound curled his lips. Let's go back to the ship. I will talk to the lieutenant colonel about the matter. Why don't you take the body back? Or take some blood samples or scan the irises. At least we can find out this guy's identification code. Layton followed the Hound and whispered. The Hound looked around, and after finding that there were only a few of their own people, he waved to Layton and said mysteriously, "Come here." Huh? Layton obediently moved forward, but was hit hard on the head by the Hound. Why did you hit me? Layton felt aggrieved. Hound lowered his voice and said, "If you want to die, don't involve us. The background of this group of people is obviously very unusual. If we just go back and finish the record, then this matter has nothing to do with us. But if we found out the identities of this group of people, and then all the troubles that followed were fatal, and they couldn't be driven away." The brothers all remembered that when they went back to take notes, they asked why no biological information samples were collected. Just say they forgot, those people will only follow the procedures and will not embarrass us. Hiss, old dog, do you know something hidden? Layton glanced at the Marines behind him with some concern. Without the order of the Hound, of course they would not take the body away without authorization. I know shit. If I had known, I would have turned into fertilizer. The Hound spat and said, "Hurry up and let the battleship come pick us up." Wait a minute. Kaylan seemed to have suddenly thought of something and grabbed the old dog. Since these people are not exiles, why did they attack us? Oh, I've already said it, let's not delve into this matter. If you can't afford to offend, don't offend. Why do you young people just Hound sighed and said, "That's not what I mean. I mean, if they are not exiles, what is the point of their suicide attack? Just that kind of individual rocket launcher, not to mention the shield, even the armor of the battleship, it can't even be penetrated." As he said that, Kaylan suddenly realized something was wrong and shouted quickly, "Quickly, let the battleship raise its altitude and adjust the power of the energy shield to the maximum level. The attack is not over yet." "You mean these people are just bait?" The Hound was startled and was about to contact the captain, but only strong current noise could be heard in the communication channel. "Damn it, forget about this." The Hound tried to change several channels, but to no avail. This river valley was shrouded in an electromagnetic interference field, and short-distance communications a few hundred meters away were not greatly affected. But there was no way to contact the battleship. Signal language. Do any of you know semaphore language? Kaylan had an idea and ran back to the corpse, using a dagger to cut off the entire camouflage cloak. I can. Layton took the cloak and was about to wave it, but stopped again. But, how to tell the people on the ship? There are only a few types of commonly used semaphores. If you change it to letters, if so, this sentence must have at least hundreds of actions. Idiot, just send a signal to contact the enemy, Hound said urgently. However, before Layton could wave his cloak, the ground in the valley suddenly trembled violently, and then, a dazzling white beam of light broke through the rock formations and headed straight for the battleship in the sky. Almost instantly, the white beam collided with the battleship's energy shield. There was no explosion as expected, and there were no flying sparks. All we could see was that the luster of the energy shield quickly dimmed, as if a pot of hot water was poured on the snow, and the shield melted away in just a few seconds. "That's death light," Layton swallowed with some difficulty. "Death ray? What is that?" Kaylan asked. Compared to Layton, an expert, he knew very little about weapons. "That is the powerful weapon of the Alpha civilization. I didn't expect that there is a death ray buried under this river valley," Layton sighed repeatedly. At this time, the white beam had begun to contact the armor of the battleship, and large areas of armor quietly silently turned into fly ash. The internal structure of the ship was gradually exposed. "I don't know how the Alphas did it. They captured a large amount of antimatter in a stable state and made it into a weapon. Nothing can block the death light. It will annihilate all matter and energy it comes into contact with, until the antimatter inside is completely neutralized." There were explosions everywhere on the battleship, but where it came into contact with the death light, even the shock waves and flames of the explosion were swallowed up. "Since it is a weapon of Alpha civilization, it must be powered by crystals. If we cut off its energy source, can we stop it?" Layton shook his head. "Most of the energy weapons of the Alpha civilization use crystals as their energy source, except for the death ray. The antimatter it emits was stored by the Alpha planet tens of thousands of years ago, and basically does not require external energy supply. It's just that I don't understand how these guys activate the death ray. This thing is not the kind of thing that can be fired by pulling the trigger." The battleship has begun to disintegrate. A large number of burning debris fell from the sky. The thick smoke dragged out black tracks. More than a dozen escape cabins were ejected from the rear of the battleship. Obviously, the captain had given the order to abandon the ship and escape. The command. "Sometimes, if you don't want to cause trouble, trouble will come to you." Hound stared blankly at the battleship falling from the sky and murmured. "You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-San. Chapter 29. The dark matter stored inside the weapon was finally launched, but the tremors on the ground still did not end. On the contrary, it was getting worse, as if something was trying to come out of the ground. "Old dog, I didn't say it, your mouth really stinks. You can't rely on me, everyone, prepare to run away separately. How many can live? Hound shrugged, and at the same time secretly gave Kaylan and Ivan a look. Rumble. The loud sound of shattering rocks has overwhelmed the explosion of the wreckage of the battleship hitting the ground. A giant beast that looks like a mammoth but is hundreds of times larger than a mammoth emerged from the ground, accompanied by rocks and debris. The earth rustled down, and its ferocious appearance finally appeared in everyone's sight. This is the first time I've seen such a big thunder beast. It's already over 100 meters, right? Ivan rubbed his face vigorously. I hope someone will give me a slap in the face now and tell me that I'm having a nightmare. Then your hopes may be in vain, and this guy is probably more than 100 meters tall. If the huge rock over there is used as a comparison object, it must be 150 meters high, Kaylan said. He had already started to retreat slowly. Be prepared to apply oil on the soles of your feet. In addition to those supergiant beasts called prehistoric epics, the thunder beast is the largest indigenous creature on the planet. This creature is covered in armor made of chitin and bone plates. The composite heavy armor has a pair of jaw-shaped giant scythes on the lower jaw. The giant scythes are mainly composed of the bones of the thunder beast itself, but they contain large metal elements that can easily pierce the armor of human main battle tanks. Of course, this statement exists on a theoretical level. In actual situations, the Ultralisk's giant scythe will not penetrate a much smaller tank, but will directly smash the tank into a pile of scrap metal. Driven by 6 thick and powerful legs, the thunder beast running at full speed is like an indestructible chariot. Any obstacle in its charging path will be ruthlessly crushed. The first time humans encountered the thunder beast at that time, the heavy losses caused ARC senior officials to issue an order strictly prohibiting ground troops from engaging in frontal combat with the thunder beast. If you want to encircle the thunder beast, you must mobilize at least 3 or more Iris-class warships. Only by using powerful plasma cannons can you have a chance to break through the thunder beast's surface defense and kill it. Run. If anyone is targeted, please be lucky. After the hound said that, he took Leighton, Kaylan, and Ivan and started running towards the east bank of the valley. Naturally, those Marines did not stand around stupidly. They divided into 2 groups as a team and ran out in 2 completely different directions. 1/3 chance, we can't be so unlucky, right? Leighton had to carefully protect the fuel cell on his chest while running. The reliability of this external energy source is really not very high. No, it's not 1/3. There is at least a 90% chance that the thunder beast will not chase us, Kaylan said. Why? Leighton was puzzled. Ask the old dog. Since he ran in this direction, he must also know. Isn't it interesting that you are still trying to sell things at this time? Idiot, I asked you to stop playing with those scrap metals and read more books, but you just didn't listen. Now you can't do it anymore, right? The hound scolded Leighton first, and then said with some pride, this thunder beast thing? The right eye is much blinder than the left eye. Let's put it this way, based on the central axis of both eyes, the left eye's field of view can be almost 120 degrees, but the right eye is only a pitiful 45 degrees. As long as if we run a few hundred meters further, the big guy won't be able to see us at all. That's it. Leighton touched his forehead in confusion, but, where are we going next? I wrote down the map on the battleship. There is a transfer station in this direction, numbered S0159, 30 kilometers away from the river valley. You have already planned your escape route for your relationship, but what about Asano Akira? Don't worry about that kid. As long as he has time to get into the escape cabin, no one can pose a threat to him. But he is blind. How about we go around and find him? Just take care of yourself. As long as Asano Akira is not stupid enough to walk with the others on the battleship, maybe he can get back to the Ark before us. Okay, shut up, and pay attention to whether there are any ambushes on both sides, but don't capsize in the gutter, Hound said as he took out a handful of broad bean-sized metal balls from the tactical satchel on his waist and threw them behind him. These metal balls spun quickly after touching the ground and quickly penetrated into the soil. This was a type of anti-infantry mine that could be deployed quickly. It was not fatal, but it could instantly incapacitate people. For the Thunder Beast, the blind spot of its vision was indeed 45 degrees to the right. After letting out several deafening roars, it chased one of the Marines. The movement of the Thunder Beast seemed slow, but its size was too huge. Each step was a span of nearly 100 meters, and it quickly shortened the distance between it and the Marines. Moreover, its speed was still as accelerating. After discovering that they were being targeted by the Thunder Beast, the team of Marines immediately dispersed again, but before they could spread far apart, the Thunder Beast had already lifted a huge boulder from the ground, and then violently threw it forward. The diameter of this huge boulder is nearly 10 meters, which is almost the same as a 3-story house. People who are hit by the boulder are instantly swept in and turned into flying flesh. They are actually lucky, and death is just a matter of time. In the blink of an eye, they did not feel much pain, and those who were lucky to avoid the boulder were seriously injured by the terrifying force when the boulder fell to the ground. They could only watch in despair as the Thunder Beast approached step by step. It's too tragic. Leighton turned his head unbearably. Speaking of which, this ambush was too strange. Whether it was the Death Ray or the Thunder Beast, they are not things that humans can control. If it weren't for the guy who died was indeed an Earthling, and I almost think the mastermind behind it is someone from Alpha. ARC's top management knows much more than you think. Hound said seriously, don't go into it too deeply. None of those curious guys will end well. What the ARC's high-level officials know, thinking of this, Kaylan hesitated for a moment, and finally asked, what if there is someone in the ambusher camp who can read the Alpha civilization's words, is it possible to control the Death Ray and the Thunder Beast? The writing of Alpha civilization? This is impossible. Your imagination is too rich. If someone has that kind of ability, would they still need to use such inferior methods? The Alpha civilization technology unearthed in many ruins is because their language cannot be deciphered. It has never been possible to analyze. As far as I know, there is a list within the Institute, which ranks all uncracked technologies by a noun. As long as one is cracked at random, it ranks in the top 30. Yes, the life of all mankind will undergo earth-shaking changes. Cough, cough, cough. When the Hound said this, he seemed to have accidentally lost his breath and coughed violently. If you can master the writing of Alpha civilization, at least 1/3 of the technical problems on this list can be easily solved, Yvonne added. Obviously he had also heard of this list. I always feel that the protagonist's presence in the recent chapters is not very high, but the writing is a bit group portrait. I don't know if you prefer the plot that highlights the protagonist or the content that describes the team's identity. If you have any suggestions, you can leave them in this chapter. Leave me a message and I will make appropriate modifications based on your suggestions. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 30. Okay, stop talking about those irrelevant things and hurry up. We have to reach the transfer station before dark, otherwise we will all freeze to death. 2 hours later. Kaylan and the 4 of them finally arrived at the place marked as Transfer Station No. S0159 on the map, but what appeared in front of them was a ruins that had long been deserted. It looks like it was hit hard by shells, Leighton analyzed. I don't know if there is anything left. The Hound, who was the first to rush in, had already come around from the other side of the ruins and said, it's empty. All the underground warehouses have been emptied. It was done by the exiles, and they are the only ones who can loot the transfer station. The Hound's nose twitched slightly and continued, there is a faint smell of gunpowder in the air, and the smell of blood. It should have happened in the past 2 days. But there is no body, not even the stumps. Ivan emerged from a relatively intact room and shook his head. Humans are also a type of resource. Living people can be captured and used as slaves, and dead people can be used as food or fertilizer. Even the mud rubbed off their bodies, those bastards can refine 2 ounces of oil for you. He said expressionlessly that among the 4 people present, he knew the exiles best, but the more he knew, the more he hated these people. In order to survive, those guys have completely abandoned the most basic moral concepts of human beings. Cannibalism is simply a normal thing in their eyes. There are ruts here. Kaylan, who was squatting on the ground, suddenly said, "The marks are not shallow, the load must be very heavy," and it went in that direction. He pointed in the direction of due south. On the map of Ark, there is an uninhabited land there. There are neither alpha ruins worth exploring nor resources such as mineral deposits around it. Therefore, there is no transfer station. From this point of view, there is a high probability that there will be a settlement of exiles exists. Should we go there? The exiles should regard us as enemies, right? Layton was hesitant. He was in a very bad state now, and his confidence in speaking was naturally a little weaker. "I have a way," Hound chuckled. "Fortunately we haven't had time to take a shower on the ship." As he spoke, he gathered all the gauze rifles, individual howitzers and other weapons in the hands of the 4 people, dug a hole and buried them in it, leaving only the 2 most basic Type 01 rifles, which he then dismantled. The optical sight and various tactical accessories on the Type 01 rifle were all scratched with a stone. Finally, a few tattered rags were torn off from the clothes and randomly wrapped around the barrel and machine. On top of the box, in addition to weapons, the clothes and equipment on their bodies were also treated similarly, and their faces were stained with sand and water. Now they were basically no different from the exiles who had been crawling around in the wilderness all year round. They walked along the ruts for almost 50 kilometers, and then they found the exile settlement just before sunset. This settlement, located on the leeward slope of the valley, is quite large. Hundreds of shacks made of wooden boards, plastic sheets, and scrap metal are crowded together. Considering that each shack can accommodate 5 to 10 people, this settlement is at least there must be more than 2,000 people. On the side close to the hillside is a simple farmland. There is a half-man-high fence surrounding the farmland. An exile in charge of overseeing the work can be vaguely seen squatting on a stone with a wooden stick, staring at a dozen people in the field. Hard work with a stooped body. There is an exit at the front and rear of the settlement, and a sentry tower about 7 or 8 meters high is built at the exit. However, there are no searchlights installed on the sentry tower. It may be possible to monitor the situation of the entire settlement during the day. At night, the light from the torch would only be able to illuminate a distance of 20 or 30 meters at most. The settlement's security was very lax. The sentry who was supposed to be standing guard on the sentry tower slipped away without knowing where. The few exiles guarding the exit were gathered in the corner, warming themselves by the fire and playing cards. "Can you sneak in?" Kaylan turned his head and asked the Hound. "It should be possible. Generally speaking, a settlement of this size will exchange information with exiles from other places. If there are too many people coming and going, it is impossible for the sentries to write down everyone's appearance." Hound touched himself. "Who?" she said. "It's just that such settlements usually have a core figure, just like the local emperors in the old era. This kind of person is a symbol of absolute power in this settlement. We'd better be careful." The sky has gradually darkened, and the temperature has dropped below 0, and is still falling. If the person in the wilderness cannot find a place to spend the night at this time, his fate will be to become a lifelike ice sculpture. "Let's go, move more naturally, don't be so stiff." The Hound blew his nose and took the lead in walking towards the settlement. When they were still 50 meters away from the settlement, the guards who were playing cards had already discovered them, but no one was willing to leave the warm fire and come over to question them. They didn't even look at this group of outsiders. He glanced at it, but focused more on the homemade cards in his hand. "They actually ignored us," Ivan whispered, with a hint of surprise and luck in his tone. That's because we carry guns. The main task of the guards is actually to prevent the captured slaves from escaping, and we are not slaves." The hound curled his lips and walked into the settlement swaggering. Kaylan noticed that almost every shack was filled with poorly clothed exiles. These people were all slaves. They were so skinny that they were almost skinny and bones, and the skin on their bodies had large traces of ulcers. All of them were radiation sickness patients, have to be exposed to radiation at work most of the day without any protective measures. It is impossible to avoid getting sick. Even the sentries and overseers were equipped with rudimentary protective equipment, let alone these slaves who could not even afford food and clothing. They stared at the 4K Lan who entered the settlement with extremely dull eyes. The self-personality of these slaves had long been obliterated by the heavy work, and only the instinct of survival was still driving the zombie-like bodies. Except for food, they have no interest in anything else. In the words of hounds, these slaves are no longer human beings, they are just a group of livestock in captivity. This should be a settlement with slave trading as its main source of income. More than 80% of the people living here are slaves who are treated as commodities, and normal exiles only account for a very small part. This settlement should have a strong armed force. They will regularly loot Ark's transit station or other weaker settlements, and then train the captives into slaves and sell them to others with trading contacts. Settlement in exchange for living supplies and weapons, Hound said. Look, there's a shop over there. The person who spoke was Ivan. He was pointing at a shack that didn't look that bad. Kaylan turned around and saw a wooden board hanging outside the shack with a charcoal writes things that can be traded. The hard currency used to purchase goods is not credits or precious metals such as gold and silver, but gray potatoes, a native crop of Alpha Planet. They are similar to potatoes and store starch in fat tubers. They are the most important staple food for the exiles, but compared with potatoes, they taste worse, carry radiation, and contain trace amounts of neurotoxins. The consequences of long-term consumption are radiation sickness and hemiplegia. 1 pound of meat of unknown origin can be exchanged for 5 to 10 pounds of gray potatoes, depending on the quality of the meat and the radiation content. The 8.8 caliber full-power rifle bullet used in the Type 01 rifle produced by ARC is worth 1 pound. 150 kilograms of gray potatoes. As for a male adult slave who was strong enough to do heavy work, he only had 65 kilograms of gray potatoes, which was not as valuable as a bullet. The most expensive drug on the price list is a drug called xyophoning, which can reduce the radiation content in the human body, inhibit the development of radiation sickness, and extend the life of patients with radiation sickness. The asking price for one pill is as high as 700 pounds of gray potatoes, and only 3 can be sold a week. But it is not difficult to understand. Whether it is bullets or other items, as long as they have simple tools, handicraft workshops in settlements can imitate them. Although the workmanship is so rough that it is almost impossible to see, it is at least barely usable. But the drug can only be produced on the Ark. The main way for the exiles to obtain the drug is to attack the transfer station set up by the Ark across the Alpha Planet, but this behavior is extremely dangerous. If Ark is discovered, it will most likely lead to disaster. Do you need anything? Seeing the 4 people staying at the door, the shop owner quickly got out of the shack. This was a fat man with a fat body. Being able to have a fat body under such conditions shows that this guy's life is good. Must be doing well. We are selecting slaves, and they will come to you after choosing them. Don't follow us, we don't like to be stared at, and we don't need others to make suggestions, the Hound said in an extremely arrogant tone, and demonstrated he touched the Type 01 rifle hung at his side like a gesture. Okay, no problem, the fat man nodded knowingly, counting from here, from the first shack to the corner over there, they are all my slaves. You can choose whatever you want. Beyond that, there is the one named Li. The territory has been lost, and all his slaves are infected with the disease and will not live long, so everyone he buys will suffer a loss. I can see for myself, the Hound said coldly. then ignored the slave trader and continued to walk forward. At this moment, Leighton suddenly pulled him and pointed the direction of 9 o'clock with his eyes. It was a shack that was bigger than a shop, almost 4 or 5 meters high. From a distance, it gave people the feeling of standing out from the crowd. The outside of the shack was covered tightly with black canvas, making it airtight. Even the door curtain was a thick black blanket with some strange patterns painted on it with white lime. "What's wrong? Do you suspect that the person living inside is the leader of the settlement?" Hound asked. However, Leighton shook his head. "That's not the key. Look at the glass tube inserted in the doorframe, the one that shines. That thing is not a light, it is a crystal tube with a complex structure. Only the Alpha civilization can make it, is one of the core components of Death Ray." "The core component of the Death Ray? Are you sure?" "But, the people who ambush are not exiles." "I'm sure, but there must be tens of thousands of such transistors in a Death Ray. They might have picked them up somewhere," Leighton said cautiously. "Go over and have a look," the Hound decided. "Didn't you say you shouldn't get into trouble? You've already been faced with trouble, how can you hide from it? It's a blessing, not a curse. It's a curse that you can't avoid. Have you heard the saying?" After saying that, he walked towards the shack, but before he got within 10 meters, 2 men in black cloaks came out of the corner next to them and blocked the Hound's path. "Praise the brilliance of the true God, praise the greatness of the true God." The 2 people looked at the 4 of them up and down, and one of them suddenly said such a meaningless sentence. The Hound's heart tightened. Damn it, why is there still such a thing? Is this sentence some kind of incision? He calmly held the short knife hidden in his sleeve, and at the same time tapped the heel of his right foot lightly on the ground. This was the code previously agreed upon by the Hound and the other 3, ready to fight. Praise the glory of the true God. Just when the situation was at a stalemate, Kaylan felt vaguely that these words were familiar. "It's that inscription. There is this sentence on the inscription." Although it is difficult to accurately translate into human language, the general idea is almost like this. Praise the glory of the true God, sing the greatness of the true God. This is the prayer of Alpha civilization. Then the next sentence should be, sacrifice yourself? Or are you dedicating yourself? Kaylan searched through his memory as much as possible, the next sentence on the inscription, if it were said in similar human rhetoric. I am willing to dedicate everything I have to the victory of the true God. Kaylan blurted out subconsciously, and even the hounds and the others were stunned for a moment. After hearing this, the 2 men in black were shocked and backed away. Oops, is this revealing? Doesn't this have anything to do with that stone tablet? Ian's hand hidden behind his back has already opened the safety of the rifle. As soon as the hound pulls out the short knife, he will immediately raise the muzzle of the gun and shoot at the 2 men in black. As for what to do next, we can only escape from this settlement alive first. But what Kaylan and the others didn't expect was that the next second, the 2 men in black knelt down together, pressed their bodies close to the ground, and said in a trembling voice, I didn't expect that the person who came was actually the Prophet. We didn't. I can welcome you from afar, but I only ask for forgiveness from the Prophet. Lord Prophet. Kaylan looked confused. What was that?